Hi everyone. So yesterday we explored why oxygen alone isn't the whole story. And today we're going to look at the bigger picture and how the balance between oxygen and CO2, what's classed as our waste products when we breathe, how important their relationship is in breathing more efficiently and also to our general health. So you may have been told or believe that oxygen is good because when we breathe in, we take oxygen into our lungs, then into our bloodstream, and that's where we get our energy from. And also, in regards to that, what we breathe out, carbon dioxide, is just a waste product that we want to get rid of. But that oversimplified version of events just isn't true. And in truth, carbon dioxide plays such an important role to breathing. It's actually how we stimulate the action to breathe in the first place. It's the presence and the levels of CO2 in your bloodstream which trigger you to take a breath. And it's also the presence and the levels of CO2 in your bloodstream that determine whether the oxygen moves from the lungs, from the hemoglobin into the working cells. What is often wrongly assumed is that when we practice breathing techniques and pranayama from yoga, we're trying to increase oxygen in the blood, but that isn't the case. And in fact, if we were to take a measure of the oxygen saturation in your blood, as you currently are sat listening to this video, then it would be incredibly high. It would be anywhere between 92 and 97 or even 98% saturated. So you are already saturated with oxygen. And in fact, if you were to elevate your oxygen levels to 99 or even 100%, that wouldn't be good for your health at all. Because at that point, your body can't release the oxygen into the working cells. It almost goes into shutdown. What we're looking to do with breathing exercises and pranayama is change the chemistry of the blood, and we do that by changing the balance between CO2. Like most things in life, more isn't better, it's all about balance. And when we change the pace of our breath, the rhythm of our breath, the depth of our breath, by slowing it down or speeding it up, what we're really doing is changing that balance between CO2 and oxygen. This causes a chemical reaction in our body. It changes the balance of chemicals in our body, and this creates a shift in our nervous system. So it either elevates us and stimulates the system, or it calms us down. And here's the really important part. We're looking to be able to tolerate higher levels of CO2. If CO2 is the trigger to take a breath, then if we can't tolerate high levels of CO2, we're going to take more breaths. Think of a panting dog, or think of how you might be breathing after really intense exercise. Taking more breath, more breath, more breath, more breath. Now straight away you can understand that that is very stressful to the system. Yes, if you're doing high intensity exercise, if your body requires lots of energy, then breathing faster is more than necessary. But when you're taking more breaths than is necessary when you're at rest, when you're just moving through your day-to-day life, you're overworking the system. It's like you've got the car on the drive at home, out of gear, parked up, and yet the engine's on and you've got your foot rammed on the accelerator, just burning energy and energy and energy completely unnecessarily. But if we can teach our bodies to tolerate higher levels of CO2, that trigger to take the next breath is delayed. This means that we take fewer breaths when we're at rest, when we're moving through our day-to-day life, and importantly, fewer breaths in total over the course of a day, a week, a month, a year. And fewer breaths is correlated to a calmer state of being and better general health, and importantly, better efficiency with oxygen transportation from when you take it into your body and how we enable it to go into your working tissues. Next, I want to turn to the anatomy. As a quick dive into it, there are many different muscles that we want to use to help us breathe better. We come to the first two, the most obvious, and that's the lungs. Little fun fact on the lungs, our right side has 3 lobes and our left side has 2 lobes. This is because its relationship with the placement of the heart. So straight away, that's an awareness that we are asymmetrical creatures. I want you to keep that in mind when we come to the yoga and the movement practices. If we take a little bit of a deeper dive into the lungs, first thing to note is that they're not muscles. They can't operate on their own. They're organs. And the lungs are dependent on other muscles to help them inflate and deflate, to take in air and to release the air. And the most important of these muscles is the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a dome-shaped skeletal muscle that controls how we breathe. The better coordination, the better control and strength that you have of the diaphragm, the better you breathe. So think of it visually. Just imagine a jellyfish moving through the water, how it domes like a hood and then flattens out. When we inhale, the diaphragm goes from its dome position and it flattens. This creates negative pressure. Air streams into the lungs for us to utilise. When we exhale, the diaphragm relaxes and moves up like the hood shape in the jellyfish. And this changes the air pressure again, and that allows us to passively let the air go. Now, at least 80% of the work of a healthy breather comes from the diaphragm. And the stronger, more coordinated, the more connected we are to that muscle, the better our breath becomes, the more efficient our breath becomes, and again, the fewer breaths we take through the course of our life. Now, there are other muscles involved in breathing too. If you think of the diaphragm in a healthy breather, that takes part of phase 1. That 80% and pretty much most of the breaths that we should be partaking in throughout the course of our day. Now, there are certain circumstances where we need to take greater volume. And at that point, we go to phase 2 and phase 3. This is where we use the intercostal muscles. These muscles contract, they expand the rib cage, creating more space, greater degree of air pressure for more air to move into the lungs. If we need a greater capacity still, then we start to use the muscles of the upper neck and the chest, the scalenes in particular, sometimes other muscles connected around the upper traps too. They raise the collarbones and again, create more space and more potential for capacity. Now, in our daily life, phase 2 and 3 aren't essential. But if we're practicing in something that's physically demanding, exercise or yoga practice, then it might be useful to use them. In pranayama techniques, we sometimes purposely use these other muscles, but importantly, we do it intentionally and we do it coordinated with the diaphragm. The real issue is when we lose control of the coordination of the diaphragm. If we're not using the diaphragm effectively, then the body turns to those accessory muscles. It turns to the scalenes around the neck and those costal muscles around the rib cage. And remember, these muscles are really only required and should only be used in that phase 2 and 3. If we're using them when we don't need to, when we're relaxing, when we're moving through our day-to-day life, it's the same analogy that we had earlier. The car is still and relaxed, and yet you've got your foot on the accelerator. You're using them when they're not needed. You're putting your body under undue stress, recruiting muscles that you don't need, and again, burning up energy that isn't necessary. Let's look at the final piece of our jigsaw, and this is breathing rate. Now, typically, if we was to measure how many breaths that you take in a minute, you would register anywhere between 12 and 18. Most students, when they come to practice, are at the higher end of that. Again, if you've got poor physical health, poor habitual breathing habits and mechanics, or you're suffering from some emotional stress at that time, it's very likely you're going to be taking many more breaths than that. Remember, taking fewer breaths calms the nervous system, and it's a good marker of our general health. Now, there might be some underlying health conditions that we can't work with, and that affects breathing efficiency. But in a large part, most people can better this, and we can control it. You can improve how you breathe, how often you breathe, the volume of your breath, and the efficiency of your breath. And in doing so, you learn to shift your mind, your nervous system state, and also improve your health. It is important to note that the goal isn't to take as fewer breaths as possible. We simply use it as a bit of a marker for our progression. So if you're to take 18 breaths a minute now, if you can improve your breathing mechanics, improve your health and your wellness, use more of the diaphragm, learn to tolerate higher levels of CO2, and then you can take that down to 16 or 15 or 14 breaths per minute, then that's progress. That means you're heading in the right direction. Now let me introduce one final technique, and this is body reading. We can use the breath to give us a little more insight into how we ourselves or the person in front of us is likely feeling at that point in time. And we can do this simply by observing their breath. If the person in front of you or you yourself notices that the breath is long, it's slow, and that you can see more movement in that lower rib cage area, the lower lobes of the breath, it's a good indication that they're calm, they're focused, and they're engaging with more parasympathetic tone, more rest and digest tone. if you can see that the movement of the breath is much higher up in and around the upper chest and the collarbones, and it's fast and it's short, that indicates elevation, maybe stress and sympathetic tone. And this is why it's so important that when we're using breathing techniques and yoga pranayama, they're understood scientifically, because it's such an important, such a valuable lever and tool for us to change our state and our students' state and the people that we love. We can help them shift states and improve their physical health just from breathing better. So let's do a recap to close. Number one, we don't need to take in more oxygen into the blood. We actually want to improve the balance between oxygen and CO2, and also practice an ability to tolerate higher levels of carbon dioxide, CO2. Number two, we want to gain better control of the diaphragm. Better diaphragm control means better breath and better health. Number three, the number of breaths that you take largely determines your current state of being. Lesser breaths, seeing the breath lower down in the body, signals that you or the person is calm, focused, and in a steady and safe place. Faster, shorter, shallower breaths displayed higher up in the body is a good indication of elevation and even stress. Now, after all that information, the most important thing of all, let's put these ideas into practice in yoga pranayama, and let's start the practice and process ourselves of improving how we breathe.